I'd like to welcome everyone to the Zebulon Board of Commissioners work session, January 18, 2024. Before we bring the meeting to order, Commissioner Baxter will not be here this afternoon, and keep her in her prayers. Approval of the agenda.
Approve the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions, comments? All in favor? Motion passes. Y25 requests budget.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to give the board and those that are in the audience, as well as those that are watching, an outline of today's work session. So as you mentioned, we will do a preview of the budget that will be delivered to you in May by each department, providing a requested budget, and I'll give a little bit more detail on what that means in a minute. The departments that will provide their requested budgets for you today is the Planning Department, the Fire Department, and Public Works. And then we'll pick up an item that the board tabled to today on the Main Street program, specifically regarding consideration and adoption of bylaws to create the nonprofit. As far as the FY25 requested budgets, those that are about to go through essentials of government, those who are about to refresh, you can take this and you can be ahead of the class, so to speak. So the state law prescribes certain duties to towns. One of those is codified within the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act. And within there, they have dates. So by example, April 30th, budget requests are due to the manager. That means budget requests from departments. June 1st, the budget's submitted to the governing board. These are deadlines, by the way. Sometime between June 10th and July 1st, the governing board has to hold a budget public hearing. So what that means is no sooner than 10 days after the budget's been submitted to the governing board, and no later than the date of the adoption. So that's why it's put in there June 10th through July 1st. And then the last prescription is by July 1st, the governing board adopts the budget. Then the town of Zebulon, we have an accelerated process where you actually look at the requested budget presentations from January through April. Typically, we use the work sessions to provide you with that information. May 6th, I will present you a budget, a recommended budget. As you'll see in the requested budgets, there's going to be a lot of requests. I'll go ahead and, spoiler alert, the recommended budget will not be able to afford all the requested budgets, but we'll see. But at the very least, by going through these presentations, you'll get a sense of the recommended budget, about what it includes and what it doesn't include from seeing these requested budgets. You'll then have a series of budget work sessions. They start on the Thursday of that same week that the budget's presented, and then they go in 6-day increments. So the following Wednesday and then the following Tuesday of that month. The idea being that the budget's been presented, you all have an opportunity to ask questions and consider revisions, as well as your citizens have a chance to see you deliberate, such that on June 3rd, they can come before you and lob formal considerations for you to consider. That night, you are in a position, you've met the state statutes that you can adopt the budget. You also have a scheduled work session on the 13th, so if you feel as though you need more time to consider, you've already got a scheduled time. The idea with the budget adoption is that if you have already discussed everything at the budget work sessions and the community's in favor of it, you'd be in a position to adopt it June 3rd. What you would want to be mindful of is not make a bunch of changes after you've had the budget work session and after you've had the budget public hearing. That's making a lot of changes that the citizens haven't seen before. So anyway, that's the reason we're providing you these requested budgets in advance. And the first one up is the Planning Department. So with that, I'll introduce Michael Clark.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. As I'm going through the requests tonight, if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to stop me to ask questions. Due to the nature of what we're going to be requesting, it's very segmented. In terms of staffing, as you know, staffing is the most critical component of our department. While Public Works and Parks and Recreation, as well as police, fire, there's a lot of capital operating expenses. Planning typically doesn't have that same level of review. However, we do have a significant needs when it comes to planning. So this year, we're going to be asking for a second planning technician, as well as a planner that'll specialize particularly in transportation planning. To provide a little bit of a detail with the planning technician, right now they do the intake of building permits, they greet the citizens at the window, answer the department phone. Additionally, what we're looking, once we bring the second person on, is they'll do the reviews for the basic zoning compliance permits. These are the things that, or the documentation that a business would submit if they're going into an existing structure and there's not a lot of modifications that have to be made, where there's no site plan changes. Think of something like going into some of the downtown businesses. This makes sense because they also need to get a sign permit as well, in addition to any building permit elements that would have to occur inside of the structure. This creates a single point of contact for the department to work, or sorry, a single point of contact for the business owners to work with from the town side. Not only improves efficiency, but also make sure that we're not missing anything, because a lot of times the zoning compliance permits do also trigger additional building permits, and having different entities do those reviews can create complexity and confusion for the citizen or for the business owners. The transportation planner would review the UDO regulations as it pertains to transportation. This includes the cross sections, the curb radiuses, things that are not quite engineer level, but still needs a greater level of scrutiny. They'll attend the TIA scoping meetings. As you may recall, when we updated the UDO regarding the thresholds for the transportation impact assessments, or TIAs, one of the things was a greater level of detail pertaining to the scoping of where those intersections need to be reviewed. Previously, it was a very tight, concentrated circle around the development, and we extended that out, not only based in distance, but also in traffic volume and intensity, and created a scaled approach. The transportation planner would be able to look at this and realize, okay, even knowing that this isn't within that particular radius, this particular intersection will have a high level of traffic congestion if the applicant proposes a development in a different location. That level of specialty is something that the town does not have right now in-house. They'll review the site plans, as well as they will be our point of contact for the public transportation coordination, specifically as it relates to the Smart Ride program, or the point-to-point on-demand public transit system that we have in town, as well as the ZWX. The ZWX is the express bus that goes currently from the single stop over by McLean's into Wendell and then into downtown Raleigh. They'll be looking to propose additional stops both here in Wendell, and having a transportation planner on staff will really help to coordinate with that to find the most logical locations for those additional stops. Additionally, they'll be the point of contact for Campo. With Campo, there's a lot of grant opportunities, and it requires an immense amount of staff time to dedicate towards this, not only in terms of attending the technical coordinating committee meetings, but also the TPAC meetings. TPAC is the Transit Planning and Advisory Committee, and they look at the long-range perspective from public transportation. As we continue to grow, and our population density increases in certain areas, that ZWX may end up becoming an East Wake regional circulator system. That's the type of discussions that they have at TPAC, and having somebody with a really in-depth knowledge of transportation planning would be a wonderful asset. Finally, and possibly most importantly, they'll be the staff contact for grant request. Having that understanding of all the technical components that are required will really help us be a lot more competitive, not only for LAP grants or locally administered program grants, but also for spot grants for the wide range of alphabet soup of grant opportunities that Campo has available. To help provide a bit of context, each of these requests are not just based on current needs, but also projected needs. Unlike a lot of other departments, we have to look much, much broader than what it is in terms of scope of the population. Namely because our process, when we start working on a project, starts with a pre-application meeting. And this would be something that would become before the board for a conditional rezoning or plan development. They'll be meeting with our senior planner, our planner two, potentially a transportation planner, to understand the details and the processes and applications that they have to go through. They will then submit the application, and our planning staff will have to go through review for completeness, as well as the details in that plan, and then they'll pass it on to the technical review committee. Typically, we're seeing that have to go through 3 different cycles. So each cycle will include the planner chairing the technical review committee for that particular agenda item, coordinating with all the other departments and development partners, congregating all of those comments through our GeoCivics or IDT program, relaying them to the developer, meeting with the developer, and then providing the details for the developer to resubmit. That loop will, like I said, continue 3 times. It'll then go to the joint public hearing, and then eventually to the Board of Commissioners for a final decision. It will then come back before us for construction drawing, which includes multiple TRC reviews, depending upon the scope of the project, and as I like to say, how good is the applicant's engineering relaying or understanding our comments and concerns as it relates to our regulations. Then we sign the construction drawings, and this is where we start really collaborating with outside partners. We have pre-construction meetings, and those include staff from Public Works, from Wake County, sometimes from NCDOT, depending upon the location. There's the construction of the infrastructure that has a lot working with City of Raleigh. That's the water, sewer, storm sewers. We work with Public Works extensively on that. Then we start going to plat review. This is where they finally start creating the actual lots that they have the opportunity to build upon. That review, we make sure that it matches what the Board of Commissioners adopted as part of their approval. We accept the infrastructure, and Chris Ray comes before you with that stack of documents indicating that it was built in accordance with the standards. And then we finally sign and record the plats. That's the indication that they can actually start building. From this, it shifts away from our current planning staff, our senior planner, planner 2, and our planner 1, and it goes into the building permit element, which goes back to that planning technician. They will do the intake for the building permits. We'll work with Wake County to review and issue the permits. And then our code enforcement officer will actually go out and do setback inspections for each and every dwelling. This is important because we want to make sure that's being built in the proper location before they actually start pouring foundations. Last thing we want to do is go and ask a property owner or a builder to move a house or come back and replat something to move a property line. We coordinate with Wake County for the building inspections. And then our code enforcement officer goes back out there along with somebody from Public Works to do the final inspection to make sure that the sidewalks are put in, that there is no broken curbs or gutter pans or sidewalks. And then especially all the public infrastructure is on the up and up, as well as our code enforcement officer making sure that the end result of what was built is actually what was approved. And then finally, we issue the certificate of occupancy. That's the moment where the population changes. That's the moment when the 2.78 or 2.76 persons per dwelling unit moves into it. So when you look at this entire process, that last box is where the population changes. And that process realistically takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years before we actually see that population change. Now, looking at the staff as it relates to population change, you'll see we had to, there was realization that there was going to be increased development pressure in 2016, and we were able to bring in additional staff. You'll see these start matching. Thank you. There we go. You'll see these lines are echoed after the fact. And while we brought up the staff a little bit a couple years ago, this line is going to, the population line is going to increase. As an example, the 2020 census said that we had just under 7,000 residents. That was actually a little less than 3 years ago because they look at April 1st from the date. As of end of business last week, we had almost 11,000. So that's a significant increase in just a couple years. But that is an echo effect of the work that's been done by the planning department over the past 3 to 5 years. And when I say the echo effect, these are the permits and the certificates of occupancy that are issued. Every certificate of occupancy is a permit, but not every permit is a certificate of occupancy. So that's why there's a little bit of a difference in here. Permits will include everything from the single-family residential home to changing out an HVAC unit, to building a garage or a deck or some other item. It could be adding additional circuits to a house. So there's a wider range that goes into it. The COs are what creates the change in population, but you can see the workload actually exceeds just the COs. There's all the other things beyond just the homes that have to be taken into consideration. That's part of the reason that we're asking for that second planning technician, is we're seeing these progressive increases year after year after year. And while we saw a slight decline in the number of new certificate of occupancies that was from 2022, that was a bit of an echo effect from COVID. You've seen that they've actually more than rebounded. However, the permit numbers, the total permit numbers, never went down. Going into the transportation planner side, when we bring in things such as special use cases or rezoning cases, you see the lines go all over the place. For quite a while, special use permits were the mechanism that developers used to get approvals for new developments. When I started, we worked to change that process to bring it out of the quasi-judicial or the very legalistic process into the legislative process to allow for a greater level of communication and negotiation to allow for the best possible development. The legislative process is the blue line, and the quasi-judicial special use process is the green line. You'll see how they were increasing pretty sharply. We adopted the UDO, and that changed the process. COVID happened, and then suddenly we seen a decline in new applications because builders didn't know where things were going to go. Additionally, they realized that there was going to be infrastructure limitations to getting things such as storm drain pipes, even lumber and wire. There was significant supply delays in order for them to build these new homes. So both of those saw a decline. However, we adopted a new transportation land use plan, and we're now starting to see these start to increase and uptick. This year, you're going to see several public hearings for developments. In February, you're going to see Zebulon South, and we have had several others that have had pre-application meetings over the past few weeks. So we're anticipating 2024 being a very busy year for the rezoning cases. With each of those rezoning cases comes land uses that are associated with it. As you know, transportation and traffic congestion is the #1 concern that's expressed to our department, and I'm sure as commissioners you hear that every day. having the transportation planner on staff will really help us be in the best position to not only obtain those CAMPO grants, but also provide detailed recommendations back to the developer. A point of note, while this would be wonderful if it was a transportation engineer, the reality is getting a transportation engineer in today's market is extraordinarily difficult. If we're able to achieve that, then we would definitely move forward with that. But for right now, at a minimum, we'd be asking for a transportation planner. So to recap the staffing requests, we're going to be asking for that second planning technician, which will help to address the existing workload issues. It helps to create the redundancy, so when one planning technician goes on vacation or has gone to training, we're able to have a second person pick up that workload, and that way we're not seeing an interruption of service for the development community. It also eliminates the confusion of process. Once again, having them step into the role of doing the reviews and the acceptance for the sign permits, as well as the zoning compliance permits, being that those typically don't require the full site plan review, but typically do require a building permit, really helps to create that central point of contact, which improves customer service as well as efficiency. Transportation planner, once again, helps us realize funding needs through different grant opportunities through CAMPO. Also allows for more technical nature related to transportation in terms of reviewing site plans and the complexity associated with those. Finally, it alleviates staff workload issues. Right now, our planner 2 has been doing a terrific job at navigating through this maze, but there's a lot of things that she hasn't been able to do that is well within her job scope that we really hope that we're able to reintroduce into her workload. Does anybody have any questions regarding the staffing components before I go into the capital requests? Seeing none. The capital requests, we have 4 requests. There we go. First of all is an affordable housing plan. I'll go into details in each of these here in a moment. Affordable housing plumbing program, smart ride participation, as well as water infrastructure review and update. First of all, the affordable housing plan, this is something that several of you have expressed, at least the affordable housing concern. As we are growing, staff's doing the best job that we can to work with developers to encourage them to include affordable housing as part of their development process. But part of it is we're going to want to know what the real details are. So this would be a consultant-led effort to go out, and there would be an emphasis on not only maintaining existing affordable housing, but also bringing in new affordable housing. We need to have that yes and both approach, namely because we have an incredible supply of naturally occurring affordable housing where there's families that have lived there for a long, long time. This will prevent gentrification and help preserve that character and quality of those neighborhoods. But that's not going to be enough. We're going to need to also look at expanding the options for new affordable housing. And part of creating a standalone process, as opposed to just an amendment to our existing land use plan, is it provides for an extensive public engagement process. This isn't something that we should just have one meeting on. This is something that we should have several meetings on with several different groups of folks throughout the neighborhood at different times, at different locations. We need to have a consultant that has the time and resources to really reach out to the community and understand their needs as it relates to this very important topic. And unfortunately, that is not something that the in-house staff has the time and resources to be able to dedicate to it. So while it's a bit of a pivot from what we were originally planning on doing, the affordable housing component for the comprehensive land use plan will effectively encourage the creation of an actual affordable housing plan that will work in conjunction with the existing documents. That way it puts the town in the best position to not only negotiate with developers, but also explore other grant opportunities, not only state and federal grant opportunities, but also working collaboratively with Wake County and other entities in creation of affordable housing here in Zebulon. Along those lines, plumbing is a significant issue. Namely, there we go. We have that a lot of naturally occurring affordable housing is also older housing stock. And the requirements that were in place for a lot of these neighborhoods in terms of the plumbing fixtures, they used a significantly higher volume of water than modern fixtures. The rate of water is not going to get less expensive anytime soon. And for some of these property occupants, their utility bill is a significant charge. If there's a way that we can assist them in reducing that charge, it helps. Helps whether it's expendable income or just be able to afford food and medication or transportation. It really can help change the quality of life for those occupants. This program would go in and work with the property owners specifically for plumbing fixture upgrades. As I noted, it is a cost saving for the occupants. It also has an environmental efficiency, being that there's just less water being used with these more efficient fixtures. Moving on to Smart Ride program, as you recall from the special call meeting at the beginning of the year, it is a point-to-point on-demand public transportation system. We currently don't have the volume of, the population density necessary to look at a fixed rate or a fixed circulator system. So this is a good way to address it. We've also seen that it's a significantly important mechanism for affordability in terms of transportation, allowing citizens to access locations within East Wake County that they would either otherwise have to walk or find other means of transportation. Once again, this would be a collaboration with Wendell, Knightdale, as well as Wake County, and we're still pursuing the grant through Campo. All of that documentation has been submitted for the multi-municipality request for funding, so we're hoping to see where that is. However, we're still going to have to provide funding based on those ridership percentages for this next fiscal year. Finally is water infrastructure, and this really should be both water and sewer. We have an aging infrastructure system in downtown. We need to have a good understanding of what is there, what are the problems, and how do we address it. This would be analysis of the water and sewer infrastructure primarily within the downtown. We were just meeting with Public Works, and Chris was telling us about some of the laterals that are running across multiple properties that don't even show up on the City of Raleigh system. We need to have a good understanding of, okay, what kind of conditions are those in? Are there better solutions? And this analysis will provide for that, and then it helps us put together a plan for future upgrades. This is also a significant economic development impact. As we've seen with the buildings at Whitley Galleries, unless they can be adequately served by water and sewer, they will not be occupied. We're aware of another building in downtown that the potential buyer has expressed concerns with the size of the sewer as it relates to his goals for it to be a mixed-use building. Having an understanding of what those issues are and potentially finding whether it's match grants or other financial opportunities in the future really helps to create that infrastructure system that supports the business community in downtown. But all of that has to start with understanding what is there first. Finally, this will help to establish those priorities for capital improvement projects moving forward. And with that, I'm available if you have any questions. Not everybody at once.
Under most of your CI requests, I know some, I guess it's just a matter of stating where that would fall under, but to me, all of these really affect economic development.
Yeah, absolutely. There's mechanisms that do intertwine with economic development. We will have the economic development budget proposal next month, and there is a whole big list of items that are going to be part of those capital requests as well. We included those under planning as part of this because there's a lot of analysis that goes into it, whether it's the water infrastructure analysis or the affordable housing plan. We included those as part of this request.
Any other questions, comments?
This may be very premature, but just humor me, if you will. If we were to look at the affordable housing plan, would we look at data that looks at affordable housing for Zebulon residents, or would we look at the overall, like, Wake County numbers, what we've kind of been quoted in with some of our development presentations?
Yeah, it's both and then some. As an example, when the town of Apex did their affordable housing plan, they looked at not only Apex, but they also looked at all of the surrounding counties as well, because they have a lot of commuters that come from other counties just like we do. They weren't just looking at Wake County numbers. So it's really geographically specific based on the needs of that particular region. So it wouldn't be isolated to Wake County.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions, comments?
Last question.
Sure.
I think. With the two, going back to the positions that you brought up, could you, maybe not now, but could you tell us how these two positions will fit into the career ladder for the planning department?
Yeah, the planning technician is really the entry-level position coming into the department. Typically, somebody who's a planning technician may have like a very basic undergrad degree in planning, or has worked in some capacity related to planning in the past. One of the first things that I encourage with all of our staff is that they go get their ZCO, or their zoning official certificate through the school government. That creates a really good foundation for them to determine what aspect of planning they want to go in. If they want to go into code enforcement, we'll work with them to advance into that position. If they want to go become a planner one, we'll help work with them to advance into that position. But for the planner, or for the planning technician, that is really kind of the starting point for a lot of entry-level planners. Those who have a bit more in depth of a degree or a master's degree would likely start higher than that in terms of the career ladder progression. The transportation planner would start out as a planner 2 and would be a very specialized category of planner. They would have the capability of moving up to a planner 3 and then potentially into a senior planner. And that's based on the current drafts of the career ladder.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I know this may be getting way out there, but I thought I saw something the other day where Duke Medical Hospital had started a program that was going to take folks, start training them in high school, and when they graduated from high school, they would automatically have a job. It would be nice if some other universities or institutions would kind of develop that program or something similar to that, so that we could have a flowing resource of qualified folks that are looking to move into these fields.
Yeah, not to steal Chief Perry's thunder, but it sounds a lot like our junior firefighter program.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So right on cue, I heard someone mention Chief Perry's name, and here he is.
That was a segue.
Great segue too.
Stolen your thunder and all.
I love it. I love it. I told him I owe him one. I'm very quick. I don't think well on my feet, but I'm trying to think of some way I can talk great about planning, but we'll try to work that in. So likewise, we'll talk about the requested budget for the fire department, and very similar to what Mike just presented, we'll talk about some of the metrics that go behind it and the operational request as well as some of the capital requests that you'll see in the budget submittal this year. So the service drivers, and very similar to what Mike just referred to you about it, if you take the diagram here, starting at the bottom and working up, we see the population, although should follow pretty closely to what Mike just presented, and we've taken those population estimates provided in the plan, and just to give us a look into the future and how that goes. The line above it is the average daily trips, where we've looked at the traffic counts as they come in. For us, trying to identify those drivers that drive our workload, that drive our budget request, I could fill this up with all kinds of different numbers and figures and charts, but it really just gets really confusing. But these, we picked two to really just kind of center our attention on and kind of work from there. The top line looks at our staffing as from FY14, and we picked up one in 18, and we're currently at 21 full-time staff. This does not include our part-time employees and our volunteer, which make up a large part of our organization, but it does capture those full-time employees that we use. So looking at those drivers of population and average daily trips, we kind of looked at how that applies to our service and the things we do. And first being population. Population, more people equals more calls. And that, that's more people to be injured and need medical assistance. That's more people to leave a pot on the stove. That's more people to accidentally set the grass on fire in the backyard, what have you. They all drive calls for service. So if you look at the drawing, again, the graph to the left, we've added in that calls for service, and you can see there's a definite trend that follows that population trend, and it increased for us between FY21 and FY22 at our current level, and it continues to grow ever so slightly. The more we're on calls, the more we spend on, more calls equal more time on calls. Why is that important? So when someone needs emergency services, you need them right then, and you really don't have time to wait for them to finish up somewhere else and income help. You need them right now. So our availability to answer more calls goes down as we run more calls, and our answer to that is to add more staff to be able to respond to those. We regularly report to you in our quarter report those simultaneous calls. That's a huge part as we have calls and we're already on calls. So that's a big service driver for us. Likewise, if we roll back and look at those daily trips, how do they affect us? Well, daily trips for us equal more motor vehicle collisions, more automobile wrecks. And for us, we only see a portion of what the police department or law enforcement in general, whether it be the highway patrol, see, because we only go to the more serious motor vehicle collisions, those that involve injuries or hazardous material spills or something of that nature. And likewise, if we overlay that chart, now you see that definite increase that when you take population and you add it with more people on the road, more traffic, we have a pretty steep incline of call volume as it relates to those motor vehicle collisions. So likewise, as I mentioned earlier, more calls of service, less availability, provides the need to have more staffing to respond to calls. We spend more time on calls as well due to, for example, with the population, our delays aren't made in a vacuum. As our EMS system gets busier, that results in us being on EMS calls much, much longer. I can remember when we initially started providing medical services through the fire department, we would respond. In about 5 to 10 minutes, our guys had cleared and they were ready for another call. That is not the case anymore. It's not uncommon for us to stay on a medical call from 45 minutes to an hour and a half now. as we wait for the ambulance and then work through those calls. And those are times when your staff are not available for additional calls should they come out during that time. So from that, we'll move to our look at the budget for FY25, and the things that I'm going to talk about, and we'll go into more detail, are the personnel request, which is an implementation of a second supervisor on each crew, 6 firefighters, which is spread across the different crews, the administrative assistant, and looking at the operating outside of the personnel. We'll talk about that and some of the other capital items just to kind of give you an overview. So the second supervisor, and if you'll have to bear with me with my graphics. I tried to find something that was understandable, and I've gotten more comments from my coworkers about my graphics, but I hope they'll make this easy to understand. This is an illustrative example of our crews today. We have 2 crews, the engine crew and the ladder crew, 3 persons on each crew. In our current situation, the supervisor of these 6 employees, or 5 employees, not including the supervisor, he rides on the engine. This is, as we run more and more calls, this has become problematic, because the supervisor on one crew, it's very difficult to keep track of what the second crew is doing, even when it becomes time to handle employee matters, employee performance matters, to perform those evaluations and manage employees that ride on a different company that are doing different things has become problematic. And as we look to the future, it will only get worse, because as these crews continue to operate more and more independently, potentially ultimately operating out of different stations, there's the need for an additional supervisor. So one of our requests is to create a second supervisor on each shift, so that each crew has a supervisor that looks after it. It also comes into play, if you can imagine, where one crew is on a call and then the second crew gets a equally important or potentially even more important, more hazardous type call, and they are dealing with that call without a supervisory, more trained individual to lead that crew. So this personnel request includes just no additional staff associated with this. It's just a matter of identifying and promoting a supervisor within that group. And as I go through this, as Mike mentioned, please, any questions you have, don't mind flagging me down or throwing something. If I get on a roll, then just flag me down. I'll be happy to answer those questions. The second request within the personnel section was 6 firefighters. And again, if you will, looking at our crew of today, 2 crews of 3 firefighters on each shift. For illustrative purposes, we're basically looking at 1 shift. So everything we're talking about is ×3. So that'll, to make the connection between what we're asking for and the total request. So this is how we operate day in and day out. These 3 on each crew. It causes several concerns. When these crews operate together, there's much more safety within that crew. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen all the time, and it's not happening more and more. 2 in, 2 out makes references to a OSHA requirement that there must be 2 firefighters. When 2 firefighters are operating inside of a burning structure, there must be 2 people outside to provide firefighter rescue should something go wrong. And with 6 firefighters, we're able to accomplish that, which is a great thing. Minimum staffing becomes an issue because, unfortunately, we don't always work with 6 firefighters if people are out on, if they're sick, if they are in a class, a certification class. Even if we pull a person away to attend an outreach event, for example, then these crews are not operating at their full staffing. As an example, a cardiac arrest, our minimum to function effectively by the protocol is 4 personnel. We typically respond both crews today to a cardiac arrest to have a sufficient crews. When we work cardiac arrest, typically that happens for, on average, probably 30 minutes to an hour of chest compressions. So we have to have a manpower base to be able to continue doing those for an extended period of time. And a number that I refer to quite a bit is our ERF, which is our effective response force. And that's how many firefighters do we need to effectively handle a structure fire. And that is something in our goal statement, but that is 13 firefighters. So that does include our neighboring agencies. That includes our volunteers. But as you can see, 13 firefighters is a big number. And when we start off with 6, potentially 5, maybe even 4, it's very difficult for us to achieve those 13 people that we need. Especially when you take these 2 crews, and instead of them functioning as 1, they function as 2. And we've already had twice since we developed the 2 crew concept, where 1 crew was busy on an emergency scene, and someone's house was burning, and the 2nd crew responded. So that is just 3 of them. To meet those OSHA guidelines, they're not able to initiate any interior firefighting. Quite honestly, 3 firefighters at a burning home, even if it's for a few minutes before help gets there, is very, very dangerous at best. Unfortunately, sometimes that 3rd firefighter on the 2nd crew is not there. If they're out sick, if they're in a class, whatever, and that results in us having only 2, which is even more dangerous on a fire scene. It's even much more less effective handling a cardiac arrest. So that gives you an idea of the concerns related with our current staffing program. And you've heard the number before, but over 400 times a year, those crews are operating separately on incident scenes. Statistically speaking, it's 2 crews of 3. It's not a group of 6 firefighters. It's just two groups of 3. So it happens on a fairly regular basis. So we'll put them all back together. So our request as it relates to this is to move each of these crews to 4-person crews, 4 on the engine, 4 on the ladder. That gives us a little bit of staffing to handle those medical emergencies, to more appropriately handle those the effective response force. It puts us closer to that 13. Excuse me. When people are out, we would still have a good core minimum group to do that. So it's 2 firefighters per shift across those 3 shifts, and that results in the 6 firefighters that you'll see in the budget request. And I'll pause just a second and see if anybody's got any questions on that. Our last personnel request is administrative assistant. This is something that we've talked about with the board in years past. This diagram, this organizational chart represents the fire department as a whole. When you look at this, you see our 21 full-time employees with our 9 part-time firefighters, and then up to 20 volunteers, and then to 20 juniors. And all together, that makes about 70 people when all of our positions are filled, which is a lot of people to track administratively. That means each one of those people, with the exception of the juniors in some respects, not all, but that's about 70 people that we have to track. All of their medical exams, all of their certifications, all of their fit testing. Most of those requirements don't give any division, whether they're a volunteer or a full-time employee or a part-time employee. It's administrative, we have to maintain the same records for all of those. Our full-time employees just have more, if you want to look at it that way. The minimum competency for those we have to maintain. So it creates quite an administrative burden. The fire department has never had an administrative person to do that. We've always done it within our existing staff. And I tried to capture just a few of the things that I would characterize as administrative in nature. All of our scheduling and payroll and leave administration, the personnel functions that every department has to do. We have about 40 different certifications that we track in one way or the other. And that track it could be from like EMT, which requires continuing education multiple times during the year, and we track it at the end of the year and every 4 years for recertification. EMT is probably one of the most labor-intensive certifications to track, but it goes on for all those that are certified. The correspondence that goes back, maintaining contracts, agreements with the county and those other public safety agencies that we work with. Our public interactions, people just calling wanting copies of fire reports and those things for insurance purposes, and data entry, statistical reports that we run on a regular basis, special projects, and then all the invoicing and that type thing and mailings that go along with our fire inspection program. So of all of those things I listed, all with the exception of the last one, are handled by two people, myself and Chief Wayne Dupree. We handle administrative functions just as part of our job. Unfortunately, we're seeing that those administrative functions are taking a lot of our job when you look at the two of us together. So therein lies the request for an administrative assistant to pull that stuff away and allow us to concentrate on other things. From there, I'll move from those personnel requests to some line item increases that aren't necessarily personnel related. There are some that are related with the expansions, so uniforms, turnout gear, travel, training, those type things. There are increases related to hiring these additional employees, so that's a part of the line item. The EMS building maintenance, as you know, we moved in that building not so long ago. Now, with a more bigger presence in that building, we're seeing more and more maintenance issues that are coming up to where we started off with a budget to take care of that building as an example, just to kind of keep it going. We're seeing that we've got roof leaks, we've got other things, so we're having to address HVAC issues. So we've included some increases in that. Our vehicle maintenance, more calls equals more use equals more repairs. The more we run any vehicle, the more you'll have. And have seen a huge increase in our vehicle maintenance costs. Medical exams, you'll find, or you'll know that there's no surprise that the cost that what it costs us to do medical exams every year has gone up considerably. The good thing is we do that cooperatively with Wake County. So they issue a contract to a medical provider for medical exams. So it's kind of like a bulk purchasing, if you will. It's not just Zebulon firefighters, it's all the firefighters in the county, but nevertheless, they still go up. And the Wake County dispatch costs are going up considerably. Again, it falls back to those same those same metrics we started off with. More people, not only in Zebulon, but more people in Wake County, more people in the surrounding areas results in the need for more 911 telecommunicators. And those costs are shared across all the municipalities, so that you'll see that not only in the fire budget, but in the police department budget as well for those. So I just kind of picked out some of the ones that are the more significant increases, the ones that kind of stand out when you look over the budget's middle. From that, I'll move to the capital items, and I won't go into great detail because a lot of these you'll see in future budget work sessions through the various committees, fleet, for example, or what have you. But just to give you a highlight as you begin to look at it, our station construction here on Judge Street, that project continues to move forward. So we keep that in our budget to make sure that the funding is available as that project progresses. Our share looks to be somewhere in the $4.5 million range. Again, that's a project that's probably north of 15 million, but our share of that project is about $4.5 million. 2 fire engines are also in the budget. We have a 2007 and a 2009. The 2007 being pictured here are both nearing their replacement dates. Unfortunately, fire engine replacement, it can take up to 4 years from the time that you order a truck before it arrives. So we can't wait till 2007 and 2009 to order those vehicles. Obviously, we won't make the 2007 replacement would be due in 27. We won't make that on a 4-year replacement. So our intent is to buy something from a stock program that would potentially allow us to replace that truck on a shorter time frame. But that does give us time to do more of a standard order should we choose to do so with the 2009. But the unfortunate part is fire engines now they take a long time to get and they're not cheap. They're fire trucks, as you can see, we're estimating those at almost $1 million each. We have a 2005 pickup truck, which will be, again, included as part of the fleet presentation that you'll see. We have a requested upgrade to our fire department access key box system, which is what we use to access businesses when emergencies occur. To upgrade those boxes, we've been using the same system since the early 90s, and technology has changed a little bit to ensure security within that system. Turnout gear replacement is an annual request for us as we replace turnout gear every year, and the $52,500 would be an annual replacement of gear. That's not replacing all of our gear. That's replacing a portion of it. We only replace a portion of our gear every year because it has a 10-year service life. So instead of trying to replace all the gear, which would be extremely expensive, we spread those gear costs over every year. And lastly is a thermal imaging camera replacement. Like the others, it is on a replacement schedule. I believe thermal imaging cameras are replaced every 7 years, if memory serves me. And that's first enables us to look and see heat signatures as compared to, so we can look through smoke theoretically. You can see people in homes because you're looking at heat signatures. We can find hidden fires. That has become a very essential part of the equipment that we use and we ride on our apparatus. So from there, I want to move from the request side, I guess, to the information side as it relates to our budget, to make sure everyone is aware. We are part of the Wake County Fire Tax District cost share. We're in the Wake County Fire Tax District, which is about 12.7 cents, is charged in the unincorporated areas. And what Wake County does is I submit a budget, just as I submit one to the town, I submit a parallel budget to the county, and they fund a portion of our budget based on a cost share rate. It's used for operating and capital expenses. So for our current year, this year is 36.95%. So if you can imagine a particular project, and if you wanted to, a particular project is submitted, it's recommended on both the town side and the county side, both approve that, then 36.95% of the funding for that project would come from the county, and the town would be responsible for bringing in the balance. For FY25, that cost share is expected to reduce 1.19% to 35.76%. That is recalculated each year based on different factors, population, area, those kind of things. So as the town grows, to put it very simply, our call service demand, our area that we serve, slowly shifts from more emphasis on the town side, less on the county, and that's intended to reflect that. It's intended for them to pay a portion of whatever we do. So that's important to know when you think about all of the requests that are in front of you here. They've all been submitted, just as they have here tonight, to the county, and should the county agree to fund those, then the good news is we don't have to fund the entire burden of any of the requests that I've shown you here tonight. So that's an ongoing process. As we go through this budget process, we'll be going through the county's budget process at the same time. So, and with that, questions anyone may have?
Is the rate that you're saying the county gives, is that all over the county, or do they do it specifically for each town?
So that's a great question. It deals with the towns that are cost shared with the county, which would be Zebulon, Garner, Roseville. The towns, some of the towns are served by incorporated fire departments. Some of the towns are served by municipalities. Obviously, we're one of those. Wendell, for example, is in a special classification where they are part of the fire tax district. So they're Holly Springs, Fuquay, Apex, Zebulon, we're all treated the exact same formula because we're all municipalities that serve the municipality, and serve the unincorporated areas. Where there's incorporated fire departments serving those unincorporated areas, it's a little bit different. So it's the same set of rules for the same group of providing the service, if that makes sense. And I feel like I've made that really confusing. But,
No, but I got you.
all right. Any other questions for me?
Chief, you had mentioned back when you was considering administrative resources that folks call in for fire reports. I know is that a form that can be like accessed automatically, like through like an online type service? Or is that something that we have to do physically?
Right. So today we do it physically. We are getting ready to move to a new records management system. That's another one of those projects. Our current vendor has been purchased by a bigger vendor. So we got to find a new company to track all of our fire reports. The good thing is the whole rest of the county's in the same situation, but we're hoping that may be a feature that we can, so people can go in there and pull that information. The reason we do it manually today, not everything that's in our fire report is public records. So we're able to sort out what is and what. The most common example will be a medical call. When we respond to someone's house for a medical emergency, there's a lot of that information that is not public record, specifically to a person's health and well-being and their treatment. But other things are public record. So if we do it manually, we can make sure people they receive the right information without receiving information they shouldn't. But we would very much like to automate that in some way. It's just, it would take those skills to take on that project now, would take those skills that are somewhat heavy on the admin, and it would just make them even heavier. So I'd love to know that that's something we could, if nothing else, create a web portal where people could request copies of reports and we could email them back. That would at least be better. But
Yeah, just ask artificial intelligence.
that's right.
They would take care of all of that.
I like it.
Also, you mentioned that folks getting medical exams. I don't know how much of an issue it is now, but would the new Wendell Wake Med, would they be able to help out with some of that?
So potentially, so the exams we're referring to are what we call fit for duty exams. So the NFPA, the national organization that comes up with a lot of the what you should do and what you shouldn't do, they describe how medically fit a person should be to be a firefighter. And then what the county does is they go out and seek bids from companies to provide those evaluations. So to answer your question, Wake Med could bid that should they choose to do it. Some different bidders do, and then whoever the selected bidder is who the county uses. We're not necessarily bound by that, but it's usually good business sense to piggyback on that bid or that contract, and that's typically what we do.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
While Chris gets set up, something occurred to me. Just so you all aware, we'll start to transition out of the operating requested budgets and into the capital requested budgets around your March work session.
Public Works?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity tonight to come before you and present a Public Works budget request. As part of, we've mentioned throughout the years a career ladder and development of that. One of the pieces we like to do is put people in different roles and give them opportunities to succeed. Tonight, we're doing that with Mary, our administrative and contracts manager. She'll be presenting our Public Works budget. I will tell you that Mary and I have worked closely over the last several weeks putting this together. Mary, if you don't know, is a very essential part of my operations and a glue that keeps us together as an organization. So I am confident Mary will do an excellent job for you tonight. I'm also confident that if you listen closely, you'll hear a little Chris in this presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to Mary and look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Put this where you can hear me. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak to you a little bit tonight about our budget. And Joe, just a housekeeping, this is controlling it?
Yeah, this right here. That's
This
forward,
one is
that's
controlling it.
backwards.
All right, and this for pointing?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So, all right, so a little bit of quick background about our department. We actually cover 4 different departments, most of which are self-explanatory, but a couple of quick notes. Powell Bill refers to streets. Powell Bill funds are dollars that we get from the state, tax dollars for streets, and our construction inspection team is included in the property and project management team. So growth is good, of course, but it comes with challenges, and it's a process that includes a lot of additional work, as you've heard from Mike Clark and Chief Perry already tonight. And it does hit the planning department first, and then a lot of work comes towards Public Works with construction inspections, infrastructure acceptance processes, and then the maintenance of infrastructure or the servicing of new homes. So in Public Works, we're feeling these growth-related pressures across three main categories. Those related to the residential development, those related to the expansion of the stormwater system and program, and then the pressures on the department's management team. So that first challenge really is based around residential development. And a little bit of background there, our infrastructure is increasing at about 20% per year. And when I say infrastructure, I'm referring to the increase in miles of streets and miles of town-owned stormwater pipe, and this is referring to town-owned streets as well. We're also seeing the growth. The chart on the right is referring to our construction inspection. This is based around COs, which for the Public Works Department relates directly to what we call site finals, and our construction inspection team has to go out to do those. So this is showing you the growth we've had. Like I said, we're increasing infrastructure about 20% a year. We're on track this year to exceed the miles of infrastructure accepted last year. Our construction inspection, the CO inspections, have increased 53% year to year. And this is all big dollars and big numbers and such. So to give you kind of the scale, we've accepted $55 million worth of new infrastructure just in the last 5 years. So we're seeing impacts from all of this growth on the development process, and a lot of it has to do with slow response times. We can't get to things quickly enough to give a response on even simple questions, but that also extends to reviews and acceptance and warranty work, and so developers and everybody ends up waiting on us to have an opportunity to look at what they sent and get back to them. We hired LJB Engineering late last year, actually late 2022, to complete plan reviews and participate in TRC meetings and help deal with the added workload of all of the development process. They've been recently hired to complete phase and plat closeouts as a bridge, but what we really need in order to resolve the issues that are coming out of this is to hire a construction plan coordinator who would take on a lot of the duties and shift that work onto them so that we can give timely responses. Did you have a question? Okay. And Chris will actually be back at your next regular meeting to speak with you a little bit more about that role. So another issue, an area of impact that comes out of residential development is actually on our facilities maintenance. As mentioned, the construction inspection team is the facilities maintenance team. They are all the same group of people. And by group, I mean two. The increasing number of inspections, increasing facilities maintenance demands, that team is becoming very strained. So you are seeing an increased risk of building systems failures, for example. We have aging buildings, they require more attention. Most of our facility systems are nearing the end of their useful lives. And because our team is so stretched so thin, preventive maintenance type tasks are falling behind in favor of completing more time-sensitive work, which also increase the risks that something could fail. We're also seeing a situation where this team is being forced to leave their construction inspection work by rescheduling it or having to delay items and tasks because they're being pulled off of that work for facilities needs. And I've got two examples actually from the last couple of weeks. On January 10th, in this building, we had a chiller failure, and that meant that our construction inspection supervisor spent all day here at Town Hall instead of doing whatever construction inspection work he had planned for that day. But it was an emergency, and he needed to be here with our vendor doing that emergency repair work. This week, we had an HVAC failure over at the police station, and that was also an unplanned event that derailed the construction inspection work in favor of an urgent facilities needs. So we're seeing that sort of thing, and the biggest thing we need in order to address the too much work on too few people situation is to get a property maintenance technician on staff who would handle the preventive maintenance, who would be able to be here with the vendors for that emergency work, and who would really take care of our aging facilities and systems.
And that's strictly for town-owned property.
For town-owned property. So that would generally be town hall, the police station, the community center, the public works facilities. It could extend, depending on the specific duties we're speaking of, it could extend to buildings that are generally maintained by other departments or where we have split duty associations. So parks, for example, they do certain things, we do certain things. So depending on what you're talking about, this person could also do certain things within the parks buildings. Same thing for the fire station. There could be certain things that rather than them having to hire it out, we could step in and help them with it.
Okay.
But we are talking town-owned facilities.
Okay, thank you.
And then another area where we see impacts from residential development are on staffing. It's simple formulas. New infrastructure and homes increase the burden on our team, which is already struggling to catch up to the growth we've already experienced. New infrastructure, meaning streets and stormwater infrastructure, increase the needs for inspections, maintenance, and repair. New homes are new service locations for our operators. So it's estimated that a new operator is needed for every 5 miles of new streets to handle the increased workload for everything that's on that list. Now, some of those things are statutory requirements under our stormwater permit and the Clean Water Act. We have to do it. Once we build it, we have to clean it, we have to inspect it. Some of them are relatively low, like the minor at first, like the yard waste collection. New neighborhoods don't have mature landscaping, so the yard waste and leaves and grass collection is fairly minor in those areas, but it increases over time. And we have had significant growth for going on a decade now. So we're anticipating seeing the homes that were built during the beginning of the growth will have significant increases in yard waste volumes starting within the next 5 years. Some of this stuff hits immediately. Bulk waste, as soon as they move in, they are buying new furniture and the old couch is on the curb. So we're picking that up. So we really do need to start adding new operators on about an every 5 miles accepted basis so that we can maintain service levels, we can catch up to the growth that's already happened, and we can make sure that we are meeting our regulatory requirements and maintaining our infrastructure. And that's why you'll see a position request for a new equipment operator 3 next year. Now, that is a new role that we're creating through the Public Works Career Ladder as an intermediate step for operators to advance before reaching the crew leader level. So the second challenge that we're seeing in Public Works is due to stormwater expansion. And in the 2022 audit, the DEQ auditor noted in the final report that the stormwater program had insufficient resources allocated to the day-to-day management of the program. The resources are insufficient to meet program goals. It's a lengthy way to say we need to add a person. They specifically called out the fact that we do not have a dedicated person on staff who is focused entirely on stormwater. And we were instructed to add that resource. The notice of deficiency is a warning. It is a warning from the Department of Environmental Quality to correct the deficiencies noted on the last audit cycle before we're audited at the end of the next audit cycle. So that will be coming in 2027, and we are already over 20% through this current cycle headed towards that audit. So one of the areas I want to make sure is clear is, I misplaced my pointer, sorry. One of the reasons the expectations will be higher in 2027 is that the demands, the requirements of the program are percentage-based. So where you see this curve, it's the same curve you've seen all night from Mr. Clark and Chief Perry. related to growth, only this one is showing you the 10% cleaning and inspection requirements. When we add new miles of stormwater pipe, or we add new structures like drop inlets and catch basins in a neighborhood, we increase the requirement, the overall size of the system, and therefore the requirements for maintenance, because it is percentage-based. And the expectations will also be higher simply because we'll be a larger community, and we'll have had a program longer, and so DEQ expects you to grow and improve over time. So some of the impacts coming out of this challenge are on the actual performance of the DEQ permit requirements. Our current program is just very reactive. It is not proactive, and ultimately the goal of the Clean Water Act was for communities to develop proactive programs. So some of the activities we're neglecting are on that side of things: public education, educating our staff, engaging the public and getting them to actually take action, going out and doing illicit discharge detection and elimination, which is DEQ speak for find people who are polluting and dumping into the stormwater system inappropriately and correct that, whether that's education or sometimes it's notifying them of violation and taking those procedures. But municipal good housekeeping things are not necessarily being done. We're not doing natural water sampling. These are all things that we're supposed to be doing, but simply don't have the resources allocated to it. We are missing opportunities to speak with the public every day, including a recent opportunity to speak to middle school students that the director had to turn down due to a lack of resources. Little Creek on the east side of Zebulon between the industrial park and the stadium is actually on the 303D list of impaired waters, and we should be sampling it to detect pollutants, to have a baseline of what's in the water, and working with the industrial partners to find and resolve pollution issues. Right now, we don't even know what's going on with that stream apart from sampling and testing the state may be doing. We actually received a call recently that paintbrushes and pails were being washed into a storm drain, and we didn't have anyone who could get there for 60 to 90 minutes, which meant the contractors were gone. So we couldn't do anything but remediate. We could not actually notify anyone. We couldn't actually make them clean it, nothing along those lines. And then documentation, government documentation is key. If you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. And our documentation right now is simply not up to par, particularly with municipal housekeeping inspections. We're trying to do a good job. We're probably doing a good job, but we're not able to go behind ourselves and check. And because we're not able to do that and write that down, it's a part of the program that is not being met. Oh, and I'm sorry, I skipped the solution part. So part of what we're looking to do is hire a stormwater manager. That is the position that we recommend in order to address the program requirements. This person would do everything except for the inspection and maintenance portion that would remain with the operations team. So they would inform that work and they would receive the product out of it, but the public works operations team would actually physically do the inspections and maintenance. But this person would be able to take over public outreach and engagement, the annual and other reporting that we have to do, data collecting and analysis, preparing documents, reaching out to the business partners in our community. One of the big keys in our community would be getting in front of restaurants and our industrial partners and talking to them about what they're doing in their stormwater program and how that all ties together. So there's a lot of work for this person to do, and it would go a long way towards meeting our program requirements. All right, and our third challenge is on the department management team. And frankly, our department management team is just overburdened. A lot of our, we've had stagnant staffing levels. We have not added operators as we have increased the size of the community. And so that has allowed us to be for our resources simply be overwhelmed with the existing workload. And so a lot of their work has shifted upwards onto management. We've had some special staffing challenges, one of the biggest of which actually is from COVID. We compete with the entire construction and utilities industries for employees because there's a lot of skills overlap. And COVID put a lot of strong upward pressure on salaries in trades-based and skilled labor categories. So we've been in heavy competition. It's increased our turnover, it's created lengthy vacancies, and all of that just pushes workload upward onto the management team. And a note about this picture, several of you are in it. This is the bulk of our team, plus 5 out of 6 commissioners. There were 2 people on our team missing that day, and we've hired 1 person since. So we're not a large team. There's 15 full-time now and 2 part-time, 3 if you count the summer mowing person who wouldn't start until May. So even with all of our part-timers and everyone present, we're 18 strong. So as I mentioned, a lot of this stuff is flowing up in management, and it's actually a lot relying on the director to some level or another. And operationally, that's not terribly efficient, but more than that, it's not sustainable. He's generally working 60+ hours a week. He works nights, most Sundays, most holidays, and there's just not a lot of room for work-life balance. And we're still not getting to everything that we need to be doing. But the reason I mention that to you is because there is certainly more than enough workload here to be divided so that we can do things more, do more things, so that we can meet our duties and the requirements at an appropriate level of completion and performance. So everything on that list would either be done better or done at all if we were to hire an assistant director, but I'm gonna focus a little bit on project management because we have a collision of projects happening now. We have even more coming up later. And so some of those large projects that are coming up and that are going to be going into heavy activity times with construction include, we're looking to bid Shepherd School road signals at Old Bun this spring. We're hoping to move forward with the North Arundel Avenue improvements this fall. We're hoping to bid the West Horton drainage project in late fall. We're working on a public works site master plan that's in phase development. We do street paving project every year, and we try to do a sidewalk project most years. And we have one project manager who is also our director, who is also primarily doing budget, who has also had a lot of operational things moved up onto him, who is also the only person reviewing plans and construction documents in our department. So all of that to say, we could very much use an assistant director, and you will see that role in the fiscal year 25 budget so that we can do a lot more and do the things we need to do well. And then finally, I want to touch a little bit on the how this has impacted our operations team. One of the things that happens in Public Works is we are stretched very thin during the summer months, and that is largely due to a combination of landscaping duties. We don't have a ton of grass that we need to mow in the winter, and due to the number of events and special event support. And previously, we only had a few special events a year, but now we have 6 concerts in the spring and summer. We have the Spring Festival, and we help with citizen-led events like the 8K or the Juneteenth event. We're happy to do all of that, but it is work. It is additional time and labor to set up for and help with and then clean up after those events. This is also the time of year when a lot of our staff take family vacations, especially around those summer holidays. And then another consideration along those lines is when the holidays combine with a special event, we're stretched even thinner because we have a short week to do our normal duties. We typically have fewer staff because they take vacations, and then we have the extra work to plan, execute, and break down from the event. So what we would like to do is get a second part-time summer landscaper on the team that will free up some of our higher skilled staff from the landscaping duties so that they can focus on the tasks that require their specific talents. And it would be helpful to have more people for these events, for the event prep and cleanup. This is also a kind of a career ladder position for us early on. It's not exactly career ladder, but we have used it as such for a long time. A lot of our great full-time employees now and historically have started as part-time summer mowing help. That includes both of our current crew leaders and 3 of our operators. It's a great introduction to public works for these guys, and we've even had part-time summer mowers. We didn't have a position for them at the end of the summer, and they kept checking in until the operator position opened up, and then they applied and came back. So this is a pathway for us to test out potential new employees in addition to being some much needed help. So here's just a quick listing of the positions that we've requested on the previous slides to address the issues that I've described. Chris, as mentioned, will provide some more information on the construction plan coordinator role at your February meeting, and the rest of this you'll see in the fiscal year 2025 requests. And anytime you add people, they need additional resources to support them. This is just a handful of some of what we would need for those roles. Everybody, of course, needs certain budget items, and then we wanted to give you an idea of kind of the special budget items that would go along with other roles, specific roles, especially things like the property technician. They would need a specific kind of vehicle bed so that they can carry the tools and supplies that they need to make repairs, for example. All right, so the next few slides will talk about our capital improvement projects and give you a little preview into the budgeting for those for next year, and a couple of them for the phased approaches to the one project for a few years. So I want to talk first about the shop rehab. Our public works shop has not been renovated or had any real major work done besides minor upfits since it was built 36 years ago. So you can see in the picture in the bottom right, there are dry rot cracks in the insulation, for example. And what we would like to do is rehab the shop and put in certain improvements that would make it suitable to serve public works for the next 20 years. This would be some basic things like storage lighting and connectivity referring to Wi-Fi so that we can look up repair videos, for example, or user manuals for vehicles while you're at that site. Safety improvements include things like roll-up doors with a controlled descent, slip-resistant epoxy floors, and ceiling fans. There's a specific type of ceiling fan that we would like to put in this. We don't want to go so far as trying to air condition our whole shop, but there are, this is not me. There, you know where I'm going. There are big-ass fans, and that is the company's name, that can be put into this space because that building's a tin box. And in August and summertime, it's 100 degrees. Outside, it is much, much hotter inside that shop. And we would like to move the air at least and not be reliant. Portacools are great, and we have that to cool a person working in a spot. But that is all that does. And it does not necessarily cool an entire area of the shop. So we would like to do something that will help make this a place that staff can work when it's hot out. We also need space for people. Again, our office building is 36 years old. It's 2,400 square feet, and we are busting at the seams. One of the key ways to see that is this top right picture here. That is our break room, conference room, training room, plan review room, prep space for laying out things like banners and event supplies, operation space for assignments and emergency response, calendars, sign-ups. Basically, if you need to spread it out or do it with a group of people in our building, that is the one room that we have to do that. So you end up with a lot of overlap, and even today, Chris and I meeting in that room to go over this presentation, we had staff coming in, oh wait, can I come in, can I interrupt this meeting? They weren't sure where to eat lunch because we were in there, and so we really need separate space for separate functionalities. We need somewhere to meet and to train our staff. We are storing documents in outbuildings because we don't have enough room for them in the office, and we're all on top of each other. So one of the other things that's a little bit insufficient now is this is the men's bathroom on the right. This is the women's bathroom on the left. The first three here are the women's lockers. In the back is actually a storage cabinet. And we don't have enough lockers for our staff as it is, much less as we grow. These lockers are fairly small, and we require our staff to have rain gear, for example, amongst other things, because they have to face a lot of different types of work and conditions at Public Works. And these lockers are fairly small. And you don't have a lot of, it's hard to take a picture of a room and give you great scale and perspective, but there's not a lot of room in the men's locker room there between those stall doors and the lockers themselves. So if you had someone using the restroom and someone else changing clothes, they are in each other's way. So we are looking to expand. This would really be a design budget item for next year with construction the following year. And because the price, it would likely be so high on construction, it's something that at that time the board would consider financing rather than necessarily cash flowing. All right, so talk a little bit about our Public Works yard. We're using about half of the 7 acres that we have. One of the things that I do want to kind of point out here, this is from the Government 101 event. So everything in those little red circles would normally be in the yard in the back. So even though it's looking a little crowded right now, if we had an aerial shot of a normal day, it would look even more crowded because we pulled all that equipment out for the event. Something else, what's circled now are all the little outbuildings and storage spaces that we have had to add for equipment and documents and material and supplies that we simply can't find room for in our main buildings. And then one of the issues that we've had, so this site has had no major additions since 1987. We've got equipment stored off-site. In addition to these little buildings, we've got things like trailers and trench boxes and barricades stored at an off-site location, which affects operational efficiency, but it also can potentially affect safety. But this issue, that white building there is our salt barn, and that dark green circle with a bit of a lighter area around it is our stormwater pond. And the proximity of those two is not ideal. It definitely means more maintenance for us. It means that you have more potential for salt to enter the stormwater system, and that would be pollution in this instance. And so one of the things that we would like to do as a part of the site master plan is to redevelop the stormwater pond, and we need to move and rebuild the salt barn. So those are all part of the improvements planned. One of the things that we're doing now is to haul trash to our recycling center in a backhoe. It's not efficient, and it has us accidentally spilling solid waste on East Horton Avenue that then East Horton Street that then has to be cleaned up. Our brine production station produces about 100 gallons an hour now, and it's from 2005. The new station we would want to put in produces 600 gallons an hour. That's a huge operational difference when you need brine, but it also means not having to store as much brine, and that has a whole range of cost and implications as well. When we start looking at phase 2, it's really kind of a focus on operational improvements with stormwater benefits. So this is that salt barn that I had mentioned, and it's in need of repair, and it's too close to the pond. It's also too small for our current and future needs. So more roads means we need more brine per snow event. We were once using about 35 tons per event. Our salt barn holds about 70 tons, so we could hold enough salt for 2 events. Well, now we're using about 50 to 55 tons per event, so we can't store 2 events worth of salt without a delivery in between, and storms tend to come in waves. We use the same vendors as everyone else, and even though we're growing, Raleigh and DOT are the big gorillas, and they will get restocked before we do by those vendors. We also, sometimes our vendors get hit by the same storm. We had one that hit us and all the way down to the coast. So they simply couldn't get to us. They were impacted too. The roadways can be impacted, and that can delay them getting to us. So our reliance on being able to get a salt delivery between events is a precarious situation, puts us in a vulnerable position. And then the other thing we'd like to do in phase 2 is put in a vehicle washdown vacuum cover station. The real benefits here are in operational efficiency over the current means of cleaning a vehicle, and then also the fact that this is a closed loop system, and it would filter the dirty wash water before it's discharged, so it's not carrying dirt, oil, brake dust, salt, fine debris, and all of that into the stormwater system. And this is actually one of our stormwater permit goals with regards to good municipal housekeeping. In phase 3, we would need to make the Horton Street roadway improvements. We're required to do those like other developments to meet the transportation plan requirements. We would also like to put in a pole barn akin to what you see in that middle picture there, which would protect assets, specifically equipment, from weather. We currently store materials at our recycling center, and it would add greatly to the operational efficiency and security of those to have them on the public works site. And we would also do some stormwater pond rehab work and possibly do mitigation credits and things like that, depending on what the design looked like by that point. All right, so on to a different type of capital project. We do annual street paving. We actually do 2 projects in relation to that. One is the paving project itself, but I want to talk a little bit about the assessment project. Every year we do annual street ratings where they assess all of the town-owned roads and give it a pavement condition rating, or PCR. Then those ratings inform the streets that we're going to pave. So it's not based on where Town Manager Moore lives. It's based on what's in the worst shape, what needs the work, and that's where the funding goes. And this method of decision-making, which we've been doing these ratings since 2006, but it shows an improvement and success over time, and you can see that in the weighted score difference from 2016 to 2023. What that's saying is that in that time, we have gone from fair to good streets overall. We are now in that 90 to 94 category. So our overall street pavement conditions in town, in all of town-owned streets, have improved by 4 points, 4.5, over the last, 7 years? So this method works in identifying the streets that need the investment and moving forward with them in the paving project. So you'll see the paving project in your budget request as well. And I've got
Now,
a few. Yes, sir.
just for clarification, this just includes our streets.
Our streets, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yes, town-owned streets.
Town-owned
It would
streets.
not be DOT or private.
Right, because
Yes, sir.
some folks will call and say, well, this street is in worse shape than the one you're working on, and why aren't you working on this street? And I think they don't know that we don't own that street. So.
Correct. I get those calls every day.
Okay.
We usually look it up in a system to make sure whether it's DOT-owned or town-owned, and if it doesn't show up on either list, it's generally private, and we let them know what they would like to do, likely need to do as a next step to have that maintenance done.
Now, I know we don't have this scenario, but some municipalities have stated that one of the reasons they don't try to improve some of the streets is because they're too far gone. So I hope we don't have any situations like that where.
No, we only have 7% of our town streets are in poor condition. Almost everything, if not everything, is paved. Some of our streets are older, and so they maybe weren't built to the same standard that a new street would be. But I can't think of any situation where we would say, it's a lost cause, we won't worry about it. So in fact, those streets probably, anything that was even close to that, probably got paved closer to 2006 than now.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
We have more larger trucks
Yes, ma'am.
going on town roads.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we need to look at how they are paved, or will they need to be paved to hold the weight of those, or what? I mean, it's going to present a problem. You can tell already.
Right. So the way that Public Works, I agree with you completely. We have more heavy vehicles, traffic, and our main street is a truck corridor, so we're special that way. But all of our pavement standards, our paving standards, are at or higher than what is recognized as the standard for street paving. If it's higher than, it's because there is a reason to go higher than, either from a safety perspective or a maintenance long-term investment perspective. But generally, we use the same standards that DOT or the Federal Highway Administration would be using for their roads. In fact, we've had, during the Greenway construction, someone commented that that Greenway would be better constructed than our residential streets because our standards were so high on it, and we had to say, actually, our residential streets are built to the same standard as the DOT road. So we address that as best we can. All right, so a couple of quick project updates on things that are underway and you're familiar with, but you will see those in your budget. We are working to get the last easement for the signal at the intersection of Shepherd School and Old Bun Road. We are securing the DOT and DEQ permits that are needed to move forward. We're coordinating with Duke Power now to move 3-phase power poles that run along Shepherd School Road. So we are hoping to go to bid this summer, and we would be under construction for about 9 months. For the North Arundel Avenue Operational Access Improvements Project, this one, you may remember we submitted a CAMPO grant in the fall to do an expanded scope for that. The preliminary results indicate that we did not score highly enough to be in the funded range, but none of that is official and final yet, and there's still some stuff that CAMPO is working out, but we are not at this time anticipating being able to access those funds. That said, we do still have the original CAMPO grant for the original scope, and that includes the possibility of a 50-50 cost share on the cost overruns. They have to approve that, there has to be funding for it, but that is also still on the table. And it is very typical for them to approve it. So we are still redesigning to address some easement acquisition challenges, and we are working to extend, one of the things we're doing in the redesign is this right-hand northbound lane currently turns you onto Pierce's, but just north of what you can see here, Popeyes and Highway 55 developments expanded the pavement. So our project now is going to carry that northbound right-hand lane through the intersection to tie into those development improvements. Developer improvements. I'll get this right eventually. And one of the big challenges we're dealing with is the utilities in the area. There is a data center there, and data centers have redundant everything, redundant power, redundant telecom. They have tons of infrastructure, and so everything is in that corridor. You name it, it's there. We're working now on a gas line movement, water, sewer, electric, every telecom company, they're all there. And so that is one of the big challenges for this project. And there is the project management aspect to it with this project, Shepherd School in Old Bun, and the others that I had mentioned earlier. So that is one of our challenges, as well as just the management side. All right, quick updates on the West Horton Street Drainage Project. I do want to recap a little bit. This was identified as the top priority stormwater project from the 2022 conditions assessment of drainage in the central Zebulon area, where we have the oldest infrastructure. This was identified as the top project based on it having some of the oldest infrastructure, some of which is under buildings. And when we ran the camera, a lot of it is failing, or it has a lot of cracks and failure points. So this was identified as the top priority project. Last summer, we did a request for letters of intent to solicit engineering and design teams to do a focused assessment, propose some improvement options, and then design those improvements based on our feedback. There's also some bid phase services in that. We hired Kimley Horn, and they have been moving through things like the hydraulic and hydrologic modeling. We met with the Main Street Committee this week to do our first bit of public outreach and let that committee know that this project is coming, and we are expecting to see the first set of plans in the next few weeks. So we're hoping to go to bid in the fall. There's a couple of buggers that could get us on this one. Easements and permitting can always be a challenge, especially with DEQ. This one has railroad coordination, and to give you an idea, if you've ever worked with the railroad, you know it's hard enough just to get them to call you back. But there's a person on the team who has a lot of connections, and they got started day one with the coordination with the railroad. So we're hoping that that helps, but it is a potential that delay that could hit us a little bit later on. The other aspect to this project we wanted to put in front of you tonight is there is some room to add some green infrastructure to this, especially along Vance Street. Now, this is not funded in the scope, design, or construction. The only thing that was funded was some initial concept options, basically the rendering you're seeing in front of you now, as a part of the current project. So if we did this, it would require additional, or most likely would require additional funding. But we want to talk to you about three specific ones real quick. Bioretention tree cells is a fancy way to say we're turning tree pits into stormwater infrastructure, and that is this top left image here. And what it does is the tree pit has infrastructure built in to filter out pollutants like solids like sand and dirt, basically, phosphorus and nitrogen, metals, hydrocarbons like gas and oil, brake dust, anything that's on the road. So it looks like a tree pit, it functions like a tree pit, but it's also part of your stormwater infrastructure and is helping to do a better job of filtering than, say, a drop inlet that has no filter. Bioretention swales, that middle picture, same idea, but it's more garden-like. It mostly filters water that's running off of the sidewalk, but they will also just straight capture rainwater and filter that down. And then you have permeable pavers, which is pavement that is designed to let stormwater run through it. So impervious surfaces like buildings and pavement are central to stormwater discussions because the water can't reach the ground without flowing over the surface, and when it does that, it picks up contaminants. Permeable pavers allow the stormwater to run through and around them and between them rather than across them where it picks up all of that pollution. So these are three options that we wanted to put before you for consideration as future additions to this project that could be done. What you're seeing in the rendering here is Vance Street, is this. This is Arundel, and that is Church. And so they're showing the permeable pavers in the orange here, and then along here would be those bioretention swales. And so this was just, and possibly the tree pits. So this was a way to show one option for bringing some of this green stormwater infrastructure into the project to improve the water quality. All of this drains down to Barbie Street, an inlet just right there next to the funeral home near Barbie and Arundel. All right. I want to talk a little bit about the fleet replacements you'll see in the budget. We do replace equipment and vehicles based on the useful life cycles. So a pickup truck would be 8 to 10 years, heavy duty 12 to 15. Something like a tractor can last 20 years. So we've got a handful of items that we're looking to replace based on that. One of the things I do want to call out, as Chief Perry mentioned, the delay on heavy equipment is extreme right now. The rollover item, that VAC-all truck, is a jet vac truck that the board has authorized the purchase of using FEMA funding, a combination of FEMA and town funding. We were originally expecting to have that vehicle by June or July of this year. We are now expecting and hoping to have it by August of next year, 2025. So that will be a rollover item. The rest of them are new items on the budget for replacement. And part of this, these life cycles might seem a little bit short, but part of it is that manufacturers typically stop making parts at about 20 years, and so those parts become harder to find and more expensive. And our fleet program is really designed to maximize reliability and minimize costs. So we buy at a discount, we sell the vehicles while the resale value is still reasonable, and before we start seeing a ton of maintenance costs on them. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about some facilities work needed at some of the other locations. For Town Hall, we haven't painted the exterior soffits and fascia since 2008. So we're looking to paint those, as well as some places in the interior, high traffic areas mainly, bathrooms, hallways, some offices that haven't been painted and might be showing some wear, but not the entire interior. We need to do window replacements. There are about 100 windows on this building, and they were replaced when Glaxo renovated the building in 1988. They have roughly 30-year useful life, and we are well past that. They were wet sealed in 2011, but now the gaskets are bad, and they really do need to be replaced. One of the advantages to replacing them, however, will be that modern windows are more energy efficient. The other thing we want to do here at Town Hall is parking lot lighting. So in this bottom right-hand picture here, you see these stars are running along the outside of the parking lot. This is actually Town Hall right in here. And so where these stars are, we want to add light poles so that you improve the safety in those areas, but also so that when we have events on this site and there are athletic events in those fields and things like that, you have an appropriate lighting level. Right now it is, I think, 1 candlelight, foot candle, and that is considerably low. So those are the 3 we were looking to do at Town Hall. At the Zebulon Community Center, there are 12 HVAC units in total, 10 of which need to be replaced. And that does include, the maintenance building has a split system, and that is included in these numbers. The lead time for the split units is about 2 months. We're at about 10 months for rooftop units. And so the 2 units that aren't included were replaced in the last 3 years, but all of the others were installed in 2009 when we moved into that building, and their typical useful life is only about 15 years. Police Department has a similar story. They have 10 units. The 5 oldest were replaced when we moved in 2008. We've replaced the other 5 over the last several years as they were needed, and so this project is to replace those 5 that were originally replaced in '08 because they're nearing or at the end of their useful life. And with that, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
I just had one comment. I know that we had talked about doing a space study. Is that included? Is that just town hall, or is that included in the other facilities also?
We'll bring back to you a space study, not only for this building, the police department, as well as the public works facility, that yard that you saw earlier.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Just a quick question about the. I know that you mentioned the stormwater pond, and you know it may be an issue later. But my question is, what are we doing now to kind of to keep those contaminants from the salt barn from getting into the storm? What measures are we currently taking?
It's a good question. So the barn, actually, I'm gonna go back a little bit further because I have a picture of it. Maybe it's, yeah, there we go. Okay. So this is actually our salt barn. And the salt is inside. There is a wall there that helps provide some physical separation, and you can see there's a concrete pad here, so any salt that did like come out this way a little bit is on that pad, not directly on the ground. And then you have gravel, which is part of the filtration system, and then let me go back. Up in here, you have additional grass as well. What you can kind of see along there is a series of, I can't think of the right name for it, but basically there's a series of dips in the ground. They're little ditches, and it is a graveled out area. It is a little stormwater structure, and it allows flow towards that pond, but it slows it and filters it as it goes as well. And then this pond here is a retention pond that has a little pipe that discharges the water after a certain point. There is a filter on that pipe, and that pond gets cleaned.
Okay.
So that was part of why I say it's not ideal. It's not just that, it's not to say there's salt just discharging into the stormwater system, and I apologize if I led you down that path. It's that there's added maintenance we have to do and added potential for that type of issue. I will say that pH isn't what gets us, and salt would mostly affect pH. What gets us is if we have total suspended solids, which is silt, sand, that's more likely to get us than oil and grease or pH because of the maintenance activities we do.
Okay, thank you.
And on that note, we have not been gotten by that very often.
Thank you, Mary.
Ask a question.
Go right ahead.
On page 60, when you were talking about the green options, I was just wondering, is there a price difference, major difference between the 3, and is one more effective than the other, like lasting longer?
Very good questions that I don't have the answers to. There probably is a pretty big cost difference between things like a bioretention tree cell and permeable pavers, because the permeable pavers is probably mostly a matter of square footage. I would not anticipate huge differences. between tree cells and the swales. There's a lot of overlapping infrastructure there. But what we are anticipating is if there is interest in the green options, then we would look at what it would cost to get a more complete picture of the costs and designs involved. All that has been funded to date is a preliminary concept of what those options could be specific to our project.
Thank you.
I have more forthcoming information as a cost of what that may be.
We will.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
And on that note, we'll take a 5-minute break. Downtown Zebulon MOU and bylaws.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we get into this, I just wanted to offer an invitation to the board. Picture's worth 1,000 words, but nothing beats being on site. If you saw something that is of interest to you on any of the sites that we gave to you, if you would just reach out to the department director directly and make an appointment to come visit, that's certainly welcome to you. So with that, you had bylaws and a memorandum of understanding presented to you at the January regular meeting. The board tabled that to tonight, and with that, I'll recognize Teresa Piner.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. Just a little bit of background from where we were on the 8th. What we did look at is our bylaws and the MOU. The bylaws of nonprofits, organizational structure, and administrative rules. Again, they are how they operate internally. They're required to be in place so you can create the nonprofit, and we can submit that information to the Secretary of State's office. The memorandum of understanding is not something that we necessarily have to do right now. However, it does lay out the partnership responsibilities between the town and the nonprofit. And I think often it is good so that the understanding of each other's roles and what the expectations are is clearly laid out, is helpful to both organizations as you move through, particularly when you have a new program such as we are now creating. Again, it's not required. The Municipal Service District presentations will provide valuable information in creating the MOU. We have talked about the review and the feedback on the MOU and bylaws, and we would like to receive any feedback that you may have. From the December or the last fall, there were no changes to the MOU, and what was presented to you in the last board meeting are the same. Tonight, again, we brought before you amended bylaws with an MSD district kind of outline in place, and we wanted to discuss that a little bit more. There were some questions there, particularly regarding residential qualifications. We have removed this based upon the last board meeting, and this was, we were going to hold a mini retreat and talk about the MSD in more detail. It will not impact us moving forward necessarily right now, but it is something that we do need to discuss at a later date in much more detail, and so we all have a better understanding of what an MSD will be requiring. The MOU highlights, they do include, again, the partnership toward meeting the North Carolina Main Street Agreement requirements. When we entered into the program back in 2019, or we applied to be in the program, there were certain guidelines that they asked us to meet, and we did agree to do those as part of the submittal of the application. Mainly that we're going to be participating, that we would be following up in training, as well as that we would have someone directing at a part-time position at that time the program, as well as being able to make reimbursements for travel to those Main Street staff, the state staff. The MOU looks at requiring a semi-annual report provided to each organization from each organization. I think just as you have heard tonight, is particularly with a lot of things that are going on with Public Works, a lot of things there do impact what Main Street would be about, be important information, and that would be for them to be able to set their plan of work for each year. So this is very important for the Main Street Board to get detailed information from the town, as well as for you to understand where and what has been completed. Again, partner in the creation of an economic development plan. Currently, that is undergoing the town is conducting an economic development strategic plan, and a very small part of that, but a part of that will include an economic development plan for the downtown area. Right now, the MOU is for a 5-year period. That may be amended at any time. It may be that as we start moving forward, we do recognize things that both of us would like to have, both organizations would like to have clarified, or to expand upon or deleted based upon the growth and the changing in the organization. Last fall, we did look at the number of members that were on the Main Street Board. It had been brought in from 7 to 11 was the range. The town board had suggested 9 to 11. This was taken back before the Main Street Board, and they felt comfortable with that, increasing that number from 9 to 11. Most likely right now, with the Main Street boundary being the size that it is, probably leaving it at 9 until that's expanded or an MSD is actually put in place. The original bylaws were qualitative. They were in nature, they were about someone's strengths as far as their abilities, with their job descriptions, where they've had experience, and we would be looking at something much more quantitative with an MSD district and board requirements. And to break that down a little bit further, we looked at a third being board members, downtown property owners, a third being business owners. The remaining 1/3 made up of the following. And again, these are suggestions by Main Street, North Carolina. The remaining 1/3, a combination of downtown or abutting residents, town representative, county representative, school representative, and nonprofit civic group based. As you can see here, that remaining third, if you have 9, that remaining third, there's more than 3 from this area to pull from. It's just giving you types of examples to take into consideration. The area that we did have a question was that residents were to be within the downtown boundary or abutting the downtown boundary. And we felt that wanted to look a little beyond that boundary to include others. This is something of particular interest that I would like to discuss tonight and to see how the town board feels. I took a look and, first I thought, well, we'll look at what our other citizen boards are, although this will be a little bit different. It's a nonprofit. Look at how our other citizen boards are aligned with being either in ETJ or corporate limits. That necessarily being ETJ, with the current board that you have, we have several members that are outside of an ETJ. Another consideration that did come up, and we just had our meeting Tuesday night, was whether or not to say Zebulon address. Well, if we say it's Zebulon address, as many of you know, that Zebulon zip code or that Zebulon address can go across county lines. And they are not, then those that are across those county lines would not be paying taxes to Wake County or to the town of Zebulon, but that individual would then, as a part of this group, would have the ability to make a recommendation on taxation of an MSD district. So that was a concern. And so to understand, I don't think there was a concern with expanding and changing that a resident could be outside that downtown or did not necessarily have to be abutting, but that we needed additional direction by just saying, again, for example, a Zebulon address that could be in another county as well. And we wanted to get clarification from this board before we move forward on that language. What we would do is be looking at approval, if possible, with the bylaws, if we could look at that language and submit officers. We would follow up. I have to submit the officers in a report to North Carolina Main Street. The deadline is February the 9th. Following that February the 9th submittal, then we would be able to file with the Secretary of State's office of looking at a date of February the 16th, being able to work with the town attorney once we have this other information in place to be able to move forward with that. Most of that is already outlined. It would just be reviewing the documents that we do have. Also, we'd be looking at a future work session. and or a mini retreat to talk about an MSD in more detail. Again, it won't necessarily affect our bylaws or affect the ability to move forward with our board officers, but it's something that we will want to address. And at a future meeting, we would look at adopting the MOU. And all of this of having our officers in place and having the bylaws will allow us to continue setting up our work plan and then assigning individuals to those committees. And they would be able then to work with volunteers throughout the town to be able to pull together and create that work plan and follow those out so that we, again, at the end of the year could report back to you. So I'll be glad to take any questions, or the manager has any direction he would like to give as well, but I did feel that we needed some clarification on the residential qualifications. Okay.
So that's why we're here, is we're looking if the board is in a position, or what information do they need from us in order to move the bylaws forward.
I think for me, one of the biggest things now, we're kind of like your property owners, business owners. Eventually, as time changes, we have it now. I know it can be changed, but the way it's written now, we almost kind of like pigeonholing ourselves a little bit as far as property owners. Or do you feel that way? It's kind of like because we're limited to, we have to ensure that, first of all, as time changes, current people that own those properties, they're not going to want to be part of Main Street, but as time changes, we know that. So, well, I assume that. So will we be able to address that? I mean, like currently now? Because the three property owners that we have currently on the board are who? Do you know? Or currently on the board are who?
Right now, we do not have them according to the MSD.
Yes, ma'am.
And we would, as additional members came on, they would be in accordance with this, but they are not now. And we would not, and I think you bring up a good question, a point, in that as we move forward, no one would be rolling off the board until their term is up. It would not be if they did not qualify that they would be rolling off prematurely. This would be a natural progression as board members come on and as we move forward with the MSD.
Term is for how long?
Right now, we're looking at 2 3-year terms. Now, once we elect officers, that first term will be, for some, will be staggered. And the reason is because of the training and all that's gone in place, we don't want to lose all the institutional knowledge. If we don't get staggered, then everybody would come off at the same time. And so we would stagger that first term so that as it moves forward, people would come off and rotate off. We do not want to lose that institutional knowledge that's being built on this program as we establish the foundation.
I'm sorry, how do we start from the beginning?
It's in, as written in the bylaws, it would be based upon the officer, and because it wouldn't be per individual. And whoever, again, it has the chair. The chair would serve as a 1 year. The vice chair, 2 years, the first term. The secretary, 3 years. The treasurer, 2 years. And the assistant treasurer, 3 years. Again, so it's not by individual, but it's by the office. And that would rotate for that first term to get staggered, so that staggered progression would start.
Because there will be situations where a person will be in one of these positions and it may be through no fault of their own, may not even qualify for that position for various reasons. Maybe they move or they quit paying taxes or something, but so we're saying that they have to, or they will be allowed to remain in that position even though they don't actually qualify for that position.
We would with this initial board because of the appointments. The appointments were made before the bylaws were put in place, and we certainly would not want to penalize anyone as we have come through this last year of training. We would want to keep them and for their hard work and for being present, and the work also that the state has been involved with coming out and training as well. We would not want to penalize anyone for that.
I think for me, we're kind of giving an opportunity now where more citizens can get involved with this. We're limited up to our three things, which is vibrant downtown, one of them. We're kind of limiting ourselves to just the three individuals that would be citizen input for the most part, unless they're property owner or business owner. Say we have an opportunity to enlist more people to come downtown with the input, because I know I get more than just, say 3 people. We're just limiting ourselves a little bit, where now the property owners, we have to have a property owner and business owner. I know they have a vested interest downtown, but I'm just trying to figure out how do we get, they wouldn't exist if the citizens are not there. So I'm trying to figure out how we can pull more citizens' involvement instead of just business owners and property owners. I would love to see that. I don't know what we can do, but because I know currently now with the current board, you have more citizens. I think you have more citizen involvement, engagement, correct?
Yes, yes. We have 3 are outside of the ETJ.
Yes, ma'am.
1 is outside of the county, and 2 are living in the corporate limits. Now, the bylaws that we initially brought were not based upon the MSD, and they were, again, more what the qualifications were of an individual. Based upon the input that we've received and wanting to look at an MSD district, which is taxing at another level, then that is where and why that you would focus more on having people that are going to be taxed as a part of the program. Because they would be, if you move forward with the MSD, that is a taxed area, or could be a taxed area, and again, those would be represented. You want those that are being taxed at a different rate to be represented.
Commissioner Miles, if you're looking to expand involvement, this final 1/3, that's probably your opportunity. And so if you have an idea for the group to consider, maybe another bullet point, another classifying criteria where someone who is not directly tied to downtown could participate, would be a way to facilitate you still having an MSD and accomplish your goals of expanding membership. So if you want to toss out an idea, I think adding something to one of the bullet points on the left might be a way to get at what you're interested in.
Okay. Nothing really comes to mind. Like I said, I just know currently, if we look at our current downtown situation, probably one individual owns probably at least 4 or 5 of our buildings. We're really limited ourselves currently, our current status and this thing. So, and then the next one probably owns 3. So you really kind of pigeonhole your selection there. And it's something, eventually with time, those buildings are going to change and expand out. So now we've just had ourselves where we only can have pretty much 4 business owners downtown, 4 property owners for most part downtown.
Well, and you bring up a good point. I would imagine, and we don't know this for sure, but as we look at that MSD in more detail, we're going to be looking at different boundaries. And so we'll be probably looking at expanding them beyond what the current downtown Main Street boundary is. You're going to be closely looking at the buildings that are abutting that area. You're going to be looking at their tax values and doing comparisons. And so I imagine that boundary is going to expand to be able to have a viable MSD district. And it would include more than, you're correct, of those that are just, I'll say, on Arundel Avenue.
Yes, ma'am.
You have abutting residents, and you're talking about some that are not in town?
Yes, ma'am. Correct.
I think they ought to be within the city limits. Unless you specifically say, I just think they need to be paying taxes and in the city limits.
I think now if she was to do that, some of her members that's the most active, all those people that are outside the city limits. So I don't know how she would circumvent that, because I know some of your biggest supporters now, to my understanding, the way your board is currently set up, they're in the ETJ area, which, they're excited because that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, okay, maybe they should ETJ, but one is outside the ETJ. So
Well, we've
that
got- Yeah, 3 outside the ETJ, 1 outside the county, and 2 in town.
One outside the county?
Yes, ma'am.
Because that's why I said they're active and,
But it doesn't matter, I mean, I'm sorry,
right.
I think they need to be,
And all we are talking about here is board membership. So if someone is outside the ETJ or even in another county, they can still be a participant, be a volunteer. This is just for board membership that we're
right,
talking about.
okay.
Yes, with the 4-point program approach, then there will be committees set up, and those that are interested would be able to serve.
Okay, that's good.
So Commissioner Miles, you want to like include something,
Well, pretty much your voting is going to be consist of your property owners, business owners, which you saying that justifies them because they're the ones potentially being taxed on a different.
They would be taxed, and if an MSD district was in place, they would be taxed, yes, sir.
And eventually, that's our goal anyway, to get that.
That is something that we are looking toward doing, yes, sir, very much so.
Can you explain that? I had a citizen ask me to kind of like break that down just for general purpose. Can you break that down for me a little bit?
To simplify, we will have the experts to come in and go in much more depth. There will be a boundary area where there will be a tax rate that will be in addition to the already taxes that are in place. The money that is collected would then be spent back within that boundary. It could not be put into other areas. I'm just going to the north, south, east, west. It would go back into downtown. So, and that's how that would be. That boundary will be looked at. Those tax rates will be looked at. Those property values will be looked at. But as we've heard tonight, and we've seen there's a lot of cost in creating a vibrant downtown with aging infrastructure. And hopefully there will be funds there that could help to support those that are wanting to come back downtown and to create a business that is very costly right now.
So would it make sense to do, because this is a 9 to 11 member board. Right. So what do you think about, like 3 to 5 people for the list? Like, would that make more sense? I don't know.
Well, you have a little bit more citizen input right now, you know what I'm saying? I understand that they have a vested interest, the property owners and business owners, but somehow you got that citizen input. They can own all the businesses they want to and property all they want to. Without the citizens, it's still gonna function.
Yeah.
So we want that. I mean, I don't have the answer to it.
Right, so what I'm saying is would it be like, could we have 5 instead of 3? Since we approved this to be a 9 to 11 member board. So
have the 5 as
the 5 will be from the list above, so that would be able to include more residents.
Yes, that is just an example using the non-member board thirds. It was just an easy way to do that.
Right.
If it's 11 or a different number, then that could be looked at. Whether there's objections to some of those, I think as the manager stated, they're on the left, whether it's to, potentially reduce some of those, whether it's to add another criteria, or whether to change the criteria for those residents. We're open to any. We just felt that we needed additional direction.
well, we already have somebody from the county, right? Didn't you say we had 1 member from the county?
Well, we have 3 that are located in the county outside of the ETJ.
And the property owner has to be downtown only. They can't be property owners anywhere in Zebulon, is that correct?
The way in MSD, yes, sir.
Yeah, that's the way it's written right now, as far as this remaining third, that they would be a downtown or a budding resident. If you all want some flexibility, this would be the time to enter that as a deviation from what's put in front of you.
So it could just say residents.
Loud. Speak.
I said, so could it just say residents instead of downtown or button, or is that against the MSD Main Street? Right.
It could say that. It could say that. It could say residents within the corporate limits. It could say residents within the corporate limits and ETJ. It could say
Okay.
residents with a Zebulon address in Wake County. We kind of just been throwing those different ideas around, and we're open.
Do
Okay.
you have a list of those ideas you guys were throwing around we can kind of take a look at? Something we kind of
Well,
get a bit more?
those are just the ones that, those three. If it's ETJ, whether it's corporate limits to expand it beyond the downtown and abutting, or whether it's with a Zebulon address, but within Wake County, because someone within Wake County would pay Wake County taxes. Those were kind of the three that were thought about.
So could we say 1 downtown resident, 2 Zebulon residents, and up to 2 ETJ residents? Would that bring us more?
I mean, because what it is she's dealing with is her current board that she's working with. I know those people, I talked to them. They're currently, like I said, they're not in the city limits.
Right,
So
yeah.
I don't know, I mean, what it is that we can put that verbiage of budding residents, that may work. Will that work to keep those people that you currently have that are active on that board now, or it won't work?
I think I'm sorry, I'm jumping in here.
Oh, you're fine.
Hopefully
That's
I'm
fine.
helping.
Sure.
I'm thinking with what Commissioner Harrison just laid out is that first bullet, that could be expanded to have could have multiple definitions of residency. So it could be within corporate limits, could be within ETJ, could be with a Zebulon address, but still within Wake County. That would keep all but one of the existing members still in there?
All but
Okay.
one.
So what we'd be looking for preferably is something within the motion that gives that kind of clarification so we can continue moving forward in dealing with the Secretary of State.
So could you say the downtown, not necessarily, well, the town of Zebulon and ETJ? If you're out of the county, I don't agree with
That's
that.
rational. I just think we're putting a lot of power with the proper owners. And like I said, there again, I know they have a vested interest, but just that business owner, you kind of limit yourself because there's going to come a time frame where those property owners are no longer, they're just going to own the buildings and be retired in Florida somewhere.
And it may be, but that's something that will take time, and it will take care of itself. It's not like you've got to have it quite that specific.
But that seems kind of what we're doing now, right? In this
You've got it now,
direction
but still, well, I mean, that's everybody except outside the county.
Okay.
And I personally, I like, not like, but I think it's a good idea to have our property owners, because they do pay taxes on their businesses. So I do think it's important to have something where the property owners are included, but I do also understand what you're saying, Commissioner Miles, with like not having with making sure that our residents have the power for what's happening within our town. I think we could do that with increasing the resident participation and taking out some words and adding some different things there.
Okay.
So the verbiage as far as corporate limits,
So you're going to add in the ETJ. We will be adding in ETJ.
I would think corporate limits and ETJ.
EJ.
So we could have somebody, that's living in the ETJ.
Right, definitely.
And it's only limited to downtown property owners and business owners, correct? Okay. We're just kind of pigeonholing ourselves a little bit, but
Are you suggesting owners outside?
I mean, a business owner could be anybody in Zebulon. They're going to have a vested interest downtown. What affects downtown is going to affect us all, as anywhere. I would think so.
well, I think one of the keys here is these folks are going to be charged additional tax money to go into what you might say a pot of money that will be used to improve the downtown. So
So they're going to be asked to vote on themselves, taxing themselves.
they're going to be approving stuff that tax themselves. Yeah. So,
Why would I tax myself?
Why would you?
Why would I tax myself? So, I mean,
Unless you're looking for, well, I'm not going, you want to improve downtown?
I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just trying to figure out,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get a complete understanding of the layout. So I can pass it on to when another citizen asks me, I can break it down and say, okay, this is what the outlook is, this is why we have it set up the way we have it set up.
Yeah. Well, I kind of look at it as like, well, you're setting aside some additional money to fund improvements downtown, you know? So now, do we want to include those changes into the motion
But yes, to include the ETJ for sure. I
and
know that.
corporate limits?
Corporate limits and ETJ.
Is that,
Okay.
So just to be clear, what we're doing is, rather than that first bullet point being downtown or abutting residents, you're expanding it to corporate limits or ETJ. Is that, it's want us all to be on the same page. So that's a
Yes.
question. So that's what we'd be looking for in a motion.
we good with that?
Yes.
I hereby move to approve the bylaws for the Zebulon Downtown Development Association with the changes made.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
At what point, before we move forward, at what point will we see, okay, no longer there's no property owners, we can't find a property owner that wants to be on the board. Business owner say, I'll give you an example of the concern I have now. The current rate for rent downtown Zebulon is $5,000, where the average is about $5,000 for one of those buildings. And what we're doing now, these people are really focusing on trying to just run a business. When I talk to the business owner, they barely can focus on just making that $5,000 pay rent. Then some of about $8,000. So now they have zero interest on being on this board because they're trying to make sure they can make rent. So what do we do when they say, no, I don't want to be on that? Well, you're going to have to come back to us. We have to assess it again. I mean, that's what we're going to do.
Well, there may have to be changes, and I do anticipate as we grow, this is a starting point. I do anticipate as we move and grow that there will have to be changes to the bylaws, and we'll have to look at those. I think a lot of it will depend on where this goes with the MSD once we have those meetings, and where the town board wants to go with that. Because if that does go into place and then there is an additional tax, then those business and property owners are going to want to be very much involved because it is an additional tax and they will want to have input on how those funds are spent. So, and rightfully so, I would. But if an MSD does not take place or it does look like it's going to be a while, it may be that we come back before you and say, we need to look at modifying this. MSD doesn't look like it's going to take place, or we're not ready for it at this time, and we'll be having those discussions.
So any improvements that's done through this board, will they have to come back before the board before funds are spent? Will they come back before us? Or those funds are just spent in
Well,
improvements downtown? How
A
would that work?
very good point, because actually it's going to be this board, this town board, not the Main Street board, that will be impacting and setting those values.
Okay.
It will be the Main Street board that will be helping and having recommendations and input on how funds are spent, but it will be the town board, basically, that will be the decision of the board and the community on those rates and how that money is actually spent.
Okay. Okay, so we're not just giving this committee just funds, couple of funds. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other
very much.
questions, comments before we take a roll vote? Hearing none, Commissioner Miles,
Favor.
Commissioner Harrison,
Favor.
Commissioner Clark,
Favor?
Commissioner Davis. Motion passes. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
And if there are no additional questions, comments, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Do we have a motion second? All in favor?